Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today on this Independence Day celebration. Thank you very much. We brought, just especially for the occasion, some California sunshine. And we brought, especially for the occasion, some models of the U.S. car industry. They haven't been imported from Cuba, don't worry. They're actually cars that are owned by Belgian collectors near Antwerp. Now, all of you know that July 4th represents the birth of the United States as an independent country. But what exactly happened on that day? It wasn't when the Continental Congress declared independence. That was on July 2nd. It wasn't the day when we started the American Revolution or the day when British troops surrendered to General George Washington. It is the day when the Continental Congress approved the final wording of the Declaration of Independence, written largely by Thomas Jefferson, one of our heroes. And it is, in relevant part, I want to quote the following very meaningful words. "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it." Those are simple words. They're powerful words. And those statements were anything but self-evident back then. And even today, people are fighting and dying to defend their unalienable rights. We sometimes forget that the United States became a state before it was a nation. Most countries that declare independence were nations before becoming states. As a country of immigrants, we have had to invent the nation, not based on race or religion or language. In an effort to define our nationality, we've had to rely on ideas and ideals. Now, a few days ago, I was in Riga for the Transatlantic Legislators Dialogue, and I sat with parliamentarians from the EU, from the United States, and from Latvia, and Latvia's National Assembly. And I recalled how in January 1981, Latvians from all walks of life manned the barricades around that building, braving freezing temperatures and potential death at the hands of the Soviet army to prevent a communist coup. My family was with me in Riga, and I took my children, who are growing up luckily they consider those truths to be self-evident. I took them to the Museum of National Occupation so they could see how Latvia was treated like a piece of real estate between totalitarian regimes. As President Obama likes to say, the arc of history is long, but it bends toward justice, thanks to people who are inspired by the ideals of the Declaration of Independence. I met such people, many of them dissidents, when I was studying at the University of Leningrad in the summer of 1982. And I met members of the Solidarity movement when I studied at the Jagiellonian University in Krakow in the summer of 1983. I was able to interview Lech Walesa under house arrest that summer. And you can imagine the thrill it was for me when I arrived here as an American ambassador and I was able to send a copy of that interview to his son, Jaroslav Walesa, a member of the European Parliament. On my first trip to Czechoslovakia in 1987, I smuggled reading material to a member of the human rights group Charter 77, a former journalist who had been jailed and was then working as a janitor. The man was Yuri Dienstbier, and a few years later, he became the first non-communist foreign minister of that country in 4 decades. The arc of history bends toward justice, but it is indeed long. The brave men and women on Maidan Square rose up to remind their leaders that governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. The Ukrainians who are fighting for their inalienable rights are no less deserving than the Latvians, or the Poles, or the Czechs. The hunger for the Declaration's unalienable rights is by no means confined to Europe. A few months ago, I had the pleasure of meeting Lilian Tintori, wife of the imprisoned Venezuelan opposition leader Leopoldo Lopez. He's been subjected to many months of solitary confinement and inhumane treatment. His crime? The audacity to call for free and fair elections in his country. Even in our own streets in Charleston and in Lyon these last weeks, as before, in Brussels and in Paris and in Copenhagen, our ideals are under attack by the messengers of hate. So though written 239 years ago, the Declaration is more relevant than ever before. It speaks to core values we still struggle to achieve, and it reminds us that we must continue to live up to those values and to protect them at all cost. And that's why, for me, this day, July 4th, is so important and it's worth celebrating.